Welcome into Talking Tigers, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of the show. It is week 11. It is playoff time, and we are here with Coach G. Coach, how are you doing this week as we're in week 11? We're in playoff mode. How are you doing?
It's week 11. We've been at it for a while. Naturally, we're fortunate to be one of the teams that's still going. I mean, after week 10, the playing field gets cut in half pretty much. We had a good week. I mean, we got all that rain, and we, for some reason, it looked like on the radar we're supposed to get some thunderstorms, and we ended up not during practice time. It's like the sky cleared. So I took that as a little bit of a sign. And then other than that, it's been a good week. Kids have been focused. I think that's a big thing. I mean, once you get 11 weeks in the season, practice becomes like mundane. But we had some good focus this week. We were able to really get down to the game plan as far as what we're planning to do against East Prairie, and can't complain.
Absolutely. And I mean, no, listen, you're at this point in the season. I'm sure the guys, they're ready to, you mentioned the mundane practices feeling that way. They just want to get into the games, and you can't blame them, but you also got to realize, hey, we got to stay focused. We got one goal, and practice is a part of that goal, and we got to make sure we're sound and we're efficient on both sides of the ball. So, I mean, I can't blame them. I'd be ready to go too, because it's football season and it's playoff time. So, speaking of football time and playoff time here in Caruthersville, last week we had Porterville come in this game and rematch from a couple weeks ago. And early on, Porterville got on the edges, scored. They got the onside kick. How did you look at the focus? You mentioned the focus of your team after, that early score in the onside kick. How did you love the focus of your team coming back from that? It's just like, okay, we're reasserting ourselves and just pretty much take on over from there on out.
I think we started off, and Porterville, they're not a bad football team, like at all. So opening up with the score, I think, again, they game plan is pretty good. I think they had a little trick play for us and all that, and the onside kick, I got a little like, really? Really? So it was nice to see our defense, like, enough's enough. And that's basically what they said. I mean, you play a team twice, and then you had the score differential that was 55-20 the first time we played. I think the kids rolled in there with a little big head action going on. They were like, "Oh, well, Porterville's here to play." And once they were like, "Yeah, we're not doing this back and forth thing anymore," then it was just back to normal. Monte had 3 interceptions. Keeson had another interception. I think we had 5 turnovers that game. I think defensively at this point in the season, I counted them up. We're at 30 turnovers, which is really impressive. 30 takeaways, I should say. 30 takeaways. So the defense locked back in. Offense was able to score quick and efficient. Wide receivers blocking really well. O-line had a good day. So it just became what it became, the 40-7 end game. And naturally, you always have that it's win or go home at this point. So you have that in the back of your mind. But our kids, you could tell they had a lot of fun. This is our 4th home game in a row coming up on Friday. It's kind of like a flop from our 4-game road stretch. Yeah, which I think toughened us up as a program anyway. But with the start where I think we got a little big for our britches there, thinking, okay, we already beat these guys once they came in, and you knew that coach was going to pull out all the stops and have a couple things for us. Change our defensive scheme, our alignments up a little bit, which was a little different. I know that something like that's probably coming this week too. So, but it was fun. It was a fun night. Especially, it wasn't too fun the first couple of plays, but it ended up being a fun night overall.
Hey, if it ends up being a fun night in the latter half and you get the W, you take that and like, okay, if we're just going to roll with it early on and you get the W here at the end. But yeah, you mentioned, having a lot of tricks up their sleeve and this defense really kind of playing discipline after that first drive. When the other team's going to have a little bit of wrinkles here, a couple trick plays. How do you kind of game plan for that? How do you kind of I imagine you got to have your defense play really disciplined, keep an eye on the ball, and not be fooled by anything else. So, how do you kind of game plan knowing that the other team's got some wrinkles and some tricks up their sleeves?
I mean, you don't really necessarily know what the other coach is thinking. I mean, especially offensively. So it's a little tougher on the defensive side of the ball to get ready for the different kind of stuff. I mean, there's only so much stuff that you can do on the offensive side or on the defensive side and still prepare for everything. So, for instance, this week we're playing for East Prairie. They're going to have something for us. It's hard for Coach Treese to get ready for the unknown than Joey. I mean, we've got a playbook that has a bunch of stuff in it that we rep all the time that we're comfortable in. It's week 11. So our initial game plan, they might come out in something we haven't seen yet, and we might have to pivot from that game plan immediately. Defense, if they're lined up in the same formation, the same situation, and they throw out something funky, you're like, what the heck? And you got to pivot quicker there, in my opinion. So when you're anticipating that, and I stand back there and I watch the team sessions and all that, and the kids are like, what are you looking for? I was like, I'm looking for what they can do to make our life harder. Mm-hmm. Like what I would do against us. And then what can we do to counter that? So a lot of my time was spent on that. Like, so for instance, they're going to run that really heavy type package this week. They have on film most of the year. They have a spinner quarterback package type thing. And then they wouldn't spread a little bit. So we had to kind of prepare for all three, just like Coach Penrose had to prepare for Sammy Monte in the backfield. Monte at quarterback with Sammy back there, and this and this and this and this and this. And he doesn't know what we're going to come out in. Just we don't know what kind of wrinkle he's going to throw out at us. But I think on the offensive end, it's easier to prepare for those wrinkles than it is for like the defense coordinator.
Yeah. And listen, you have Coach Treese, you have Joey, to name a couple that have coached a lot of football, have played football here before, have played in these big games, and you talk about the ability for them to try and make adjustments. How great is it for you knowing that you have some guys that are from this area, that have played here, coached here, that you can kind of lean on and say like, hey, we got to make this adjustment. And, you've played a lot of football here, you coached a lot of football here. How great is it for you that you can kind of lean on them?
I mean, it's really nice that I have two different eras, and then the perspective that I bring. So when you sit in there and you're listening to what Joey's game plan is, and I'm more of an offensive guy. So Joey and I are kind of on the same page offensively. But then you have Coach Treese's experience of, hey, we need to add this look and this look and this look, and it makes sense. And it's nice to be able to have the guy that's been a defense court or a football coach for 18 years. And then you have Joey, like you said, who's played all these opponents before and kind of seen football here over the years, and something that I don't have that experience in because I've only been this is my third season. So it's nice that you have three different perspectives and you're able to kind of iron out a philosophy and kind of iron out a game plan and bounce ideas off each other. Like, hey, do you like this? Now, what about this? And I think it makes the staff really well-rounded. I think it's, and how high school football is, it's Jimmys and Joes, less than X's and O's. But when you have guys that are working together to put the Jimmys and the Joes in the right spot and calling the right X's and O's, it really does make a difference. And I think now at this point, we've all been coaching together for, Joey and I, since I got here, and Coach Treese for 2 years. You kind of learn how their thought processes are. Your systems, your terminology start to adapt to one another. And then you end up, as season goes on, figuring out who's the best at this and who's the best at this and who's the best at this. Because we're fortunate right now, we get to platoon some guys.
Yeah.
On offense and defense, which is not a luxury that a lot of Class 2 teams have. But having us all together and what Teresa's experience and Joey's playing experience and coaching experience now has been awesome, invaluable.
Absolutely. It's got to be great to, as a coach, to just be kind of able to have those types of guys that have had that experience and just like, hey, what do you think of this? How do you see this? And just get those opinions and kind of like, okay, how can we form a game plan off of this? So we talked a little bit, you mentioned wide receivers blocking. We talked a little bit about this last week with Juan McVay. Of course, he had the big touchdown catch last week. And you mentioned his blocking, and I know it's got to be good for you to see a guy that has worked his butt off and blocking all season long get an opportunity to have a touchdown catch like that. But and you see Keeston Clowers making impact here on offense the last couple of weeks. How big is it for you knowing that you have two guys in Sammy and Jermonte, that you have other guys step up and make big plays when their name is called? Because it is the playoffs. Teams are going to key in on Sammy and Jermonte. So how big is it for you to have other guys step in when their numbers are called?
It's huge. And I think we fall into a lull of the Sammy and Monte train. I mean, Sammy's got 29 touchdowns, Monte's got 21 touchdowns, and that's phenomenal. But I had a conversation with a kid a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, if you want the ball, prove to me that I need to get it to you. Like, I should have to sit, and right now I'm in the staff office, I should have to look at Joe and be like, we need to get this kid the ball. Like, that's where, with these guys stepping up huge in these tight games, I mean, you look at Keeston, who had, I think he had 2 interceptions and 2 touchdowns at St. Jen, and he had another interception and at Portersville, and then you had Quintarius run that slant right behind Portersville, bringing extra pressure against the defense, or extra pressure to stop Sammy and Monte. Boom, right over the top, huge touchdown. And the fact that those guys we've got guys that are stepping up late, and they've been there all year. They really have. But now their impact on the program is bigger, because now you go to a game and they're like, oh, we're worried about 3 and 8. I was like, what about Keeston? What about Quintarius? What about, I mean, you have Trayshawn Mace, who's our fullback now, kind of split out at wide receiver so we can move him around. You got to plan for all of them now. Mm-hmm. And it takes the heat a little bit off of everybody. So I'm proud of both of them. Poor Quintarius, every time he scores touchdowns, it seemed like he got called back. So he finally got his touchdown, and he's an impact. I mean, the kid's got phenomenal hands. He's a good football player. And he's grown a lot this year. Football-wise, attitude-wise, again, I can talk about Keeston's growth for days, just like last week. And those guys have made themselves enough of a threat that if you don't plan for them, they will hurt you. Because if we can get you the ball, they can make something happen, and they both proved it. So it's made us more well-rounded. It's made us more expensive to game plan against, meaning that you have to account for that. And then it's just fun seeing kids score touchdowns. I mean, you love it. You see kids score a touchdown and you get fired up for them.
Hey, I know you got to be fired up after, Juan McVay had that open touchdown. It's like that. You will not have an easier touchdown than that. So I'm sure you were really thrilled about, seeing him just block his tail off for Sammy Jermonte. Just seeing like, boom, here's the easiest touchdown you will probably ever score. But I know, you had to be fired up for that, saying you got to chip in, make a play. We talked about, the defense, and you talked about Jermonte having 11 interceptions, and we talked about Keeston getting in on the party. How great is it for you? I mean, you know what you have up front, but knowing that you have guys back there that are a threat to pick it off, it's got to make you feel good that, hey, if a team decides we want to pass on you, well, then we got some guys back in the secondary that are a threat to intercept the ball.
I mean, our defense right now to this point has 19 interceptions. Monte has 11. I know Sammy has 1. I think Josiah has 2. And I think Keeston has 3 or 4, something like that. So, I mean, you've got guys that can make plays on the ball. And what it does is, if you don't have a quarterback that can really put the ball where it needs to be, there's a good chance it's going to end up getting intercepted back there. I mean, Monte's Monte. I mean, he's a generational talent. Oh, Oscar has a pick too. I forgot about Oscar. He's a generational talent on offense and defense. He can do a lot of things. He can scrape sideline to sideline. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball, blah, blah. With him back there at safety, it's like if you don't make a really well-informed decision as a quarterback, there's a good chance that he's going to get his hands on.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing at the corner position. Josiah's got a couple picks. Heason's got a couple picks. We have an outside linebacker, Chasman Thomas, with an interception. Our middle linebacker has an interception. So it's one of those things where you have to be – it kind of forces your opponent's offense to be in a good spot too. Now, when you try to pick balls off all the time, you there's a good chance you can get beat. I mean, you don't want to be I just want to catch a pick here and then blow my coverage, blah, blah. But we've been very fortunate that, especially the last couple of weeks, our pass defense has grown a lot. We've been able to really defend the air a lot better. But when we can get turnovers and free offensive possessions, that's good stuff. There's nothing that fires me up. I mean, as an offensive guy, scoring a touchdown is awesome. But there's nothing better than watching somebody get picked off on their team. Naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, you don't want to be too aggressive back there. It's just picking the spots. Like, okay, this is a good chance. It's a big play here. But we got a chance to turn over the ball, get back to our offense here. Maybe it's after a score. So it's just about picking those spots and moments in those games and just not being super aggressive all the time. Because like you said, that could beat you. You can have a busted coverage and somebody can get one open. So
I think identifying the ball in the air is huge for them. And they
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think having guys that play wide receiver there, that can really help them out because you can you notice wide receiver tells because you played the position and you can kind of like, okay, here's where they're looking at. Their head is looking here and just notice tells about them, about what they're going to do. East Prairie, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I guess let's talk about a little more. 8-2 team coming in. What are you kind of stressing with this East Prairie team? What are some of the keys that you're kind of looking at on offense and defense saying like, hey, we need to look for this or we need to look for that?
Start with their offense. They're two big players, number 6 and number 5. And they're number 5's fast, number 6 powerful runner. I think he's got 1,500 yards this season too. A priority for us is going to be tackling low. B, we have to control the line of scrimmage overall anyway. I mean, regardless of what window dressing they're going to put on, we know what their identity has been all year. Ground and pound. This is my 3rd time coaching against East Prairie. It's always been the same story. The ground and pound, they're going to try to hit us up the middle, hit us to the outside, stretch us out, throw almost like a waggle pass, come back, boom, 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 and that's their style. And we have to be prepared for that. So we prepared very similar to how we prepared against Carlisle. Charleston runs similar aspects in their offense as East Prairie does. Now, they're a whole different animal. They almost run that heavy package that we saw from Caruthersville both times. That's kind of almost their base style of offense. So we've already had bits and pieces of that game plan put in as the year's gone on. Defensively, if we get vertical penetration, tackle low, and then contain, and force guys inside, which is every defense's goal anyway. That's kind of your thought process when you're playing a team like that. Naturally, we'll have some twists and turns in there for them. But I mean, it's Coach Treese. I mean, when you're a young head coach, and I don't feel young, and my beard doesn't look young, but at 31, there's nothing better than a guy who's been coaching football for 18 years. And he says, all right, boys, this is what we're doing. And you're like, okay, makes sense. I mean, you've coached against him 18 times. So,
yeah.
and he's got such a beat on that kind of stuff that he answers all your questions before you can even ask it as a head coach. And it's nice to where if we kind of see something, he's like, I don't know about that. What do you think about this? Or what do you think about, and watching him kind of bounce ideas off of the other coaches and kind of figure out where the sweet spot is in the game plan, it's pretty cool to see. It's a huge learning experience. So, that's kind of how you have to approach that offense. Now their defense, they have that almost that 34, I call it a 34 look, which is almost ends up being a 5-2. We saw something similar against like the Hayti, something similar when we played Portugal the first time. It's a defense we've seen before, but I know they're going to have some wrinkle for us because of Sammy and Gervonta. I mean, you look at Gervonta's averaging 10.7 yards a carry, and Sammy's at 8.6, and it's like they're going to have something, whether it's bringing pressure, whether it's when they're both in the backfield doing this, and that's stuff that we kind of have to anticipate. But we have a lot of creative ways to kind of get through that aspect. Their running back seems to be their outside linebacker, and the running back's a good football player, number 6. Can't think of his dang name right now, but I can barely remember half our kids' names when I'm trying to get. I'm like, hey, you come here, but they're physical, man. They're physical. That number 5, I think, he's fast. He's a good football player. His name is Connor Markham. I remember because they threw a deep ball against us last year. We were like, oh wow, that kid is fast. So you kind of have to identify where he is because he's able to move really quickly. Their defensive line's physical. Their linebackers are physical. It's a physical football team. I'm just interested to see what they come out in. I think Joey, as an offensive guy, that kind of makes you lose sleep. Just like what are they going to throw wrinkle in an offense makes Coach Trace lose sleep. But they haven't really broke their identity defensively a lot this year. And very rarely did they bring their offensive identity, but it's semifinals of the district playoffs. So something's happening. Something.
Yeah. So something's got to give. Something's got to give. You want to bring in a couple wrinkles, introduce. You don't want to completely change it, but you want to introduce a couple different things that can maybe help you out.
Well, if you can't, Coach Treese said, I forgot, maybe it was Mr. Garland quote, if you can't run your base stuff, you can't win. Like when it comes down to what's your base offense and defense, if you can't run that, then, and you want to try to keep everything as married to your base offense and defense as possible. You don't want to confuse the kids. You want to come in and go, all right, we just invented this. And they're like, what? This is not even, the rules are different and this and this. You want to keep kind of things married. You want to keep almost job assignments almost as similar as you can. And I know, especially in high school football, you go from playing an air raid team to a double wing team to a single wing team to a power ride team to a spread team and then back to an air raid. And then the next week you're playing a double wing and you're like, oh, can't we all just run similar stuff? But
yeah. It would make life simpler, but I guess that's in life, coach. It can't be as simple as you want it to be sometimes, with all these different formations. So East Prairie, really excited to see how this game unfolds on Friday night. Of course, we had a big crowd at Hopke last week, and I know we're all expecting another big crowd on Friday night that they're going to bring it for another playoff game. That's a huge advantage to have when you have a crowd that big that comes out and supports your team every week. I imagine, and you're going to be really happy to hear the fans back this week. You're talking about those 4 home games that you're going to have after this week, and I know you're going to be happy to hear those fans back, aren't you, Coach?
We're very fortunate. You look at it, we played Carlisle in the rain and they were there. And that was a big one because I'm going to be honest with you. That's loyalty.
Yeah.
Then we had a ton of people travel with us to Valley in the rain. That's loyalty. And you walk out of this, the kids run out of the tunnel. And last week we were on the sideline we're usually on. And you look in your stands and you see people waving red towels and screaming and yelling and jumping up and down and people getting fired up, and you can't even hear the other crowd's fans because the voices of you've got a couple of people and every coach has got them the voices that cut through everybody else's that's yelling at you. Shout out to Latrice Rogers. I know when you're yelling at me because I hear you. But it's awesome. And then you've got the whole paint the town red thing going on this week, which kind of stemmed from Miss Bullington, and it kind of took off and became a thing. And you've got all these people wanting to, we got the ribbon. Like, you can't beat the Caruthersville hometown support. And it's awesome. And we wouldn't be able to kind of be where we're at without it. You get the community aspect into everything. And they've been awesome. And I can't wait. I mean, I know poor Miss Sandy and Jody and Miss Jody up in the office have been selling tickets left and right. And every time they hear that little doorbell thing ring, they're like, oh. But it's nice. And Caruthersville keep wearing out Miss Sandy and Miss Jody in the office and get the tickets. And the kids love it. We'll be on the bleacher sideline this week. So we get the full impact of our fans, which is a fun change. It's going to be less quiet, which is a great thing. That's why Coach Street plays at the Mickey Mouse. He doesn't have to hear the crowd noise. But we're thankful for him. I'm thankful for him. I think that having a home field advantage like that has been phenomenal for us. And we've got really great people in this town that come out and support in droves, rain, snow, sleet, or hail, basically, for Caruthersville football. And I don't know many towns that have that.
Yeah, it's big time, especially in the playoffs. Everything's on the line. Having that crowd that can affect everything, that's big time. And you get a crowd like Caruthersville's really into it. They're going to make life difficult for the opposing team and when they're out on offense. And I'm going to be cheering the boys on, which I know that's a great comfort to them, having all those fans encouraging them to keep on going, keep on making these plays. And so it's going to be a fun night, Friday night, as we got East Prairie coming to town. Of course, 6:45 is the pregame with Paul Glass and myself on KCRV on Facebook. Of course, you have to Misha, go on there. And, of course, we got the radio broadcast, so tune in for that. But, Coach, before we get on out here, we've been doing college picks every week so far. And this week, I'm looking at the games. We got a couple SEC matchups. We got a Big Ten matchup. And, of course, we had our first playoff rankings this past week. So we already got that going on. But two SEC games. I already know the one pick between Alabama and LSU. I already know who you're siding with on that one. But that's going to be a big game for both those teams because the playoffs, they're on the line for them too in that game.
The loser of that game is not going to the playoffs. It's just that if Alabama or LSU is going to keep their playoff hopes alive, you have to win this week. Alabama's resume is even already started to look a little iffy, and in LSU, I mean, bye.
Yeah.
So might be all right, but and I know I have a couple kids on my team that are LSU fans. That's unfortunate for them. But that's a huge playoff implication game, and I think I think they got a little mad about the Vandy thing. They kind of took it a little personal, and when kids start taking things personal, they play a little bit harder. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I hate LSU. So,
yeah. And listen, I think for Alabama, if they lose this one, even with 3 losses, that Georgia win, while great, I don't think that's enough. I think you got to have this one. You got to have this one for sure.
The Georgia win, Georgia's played too many close games for that win to be phenomenal, if that makes sense. I mean, they had to come back against Florida last week. Really, with a redshirt freshman quarterback, and that kid that he transferred from Yale, he's a pretty talented football player. But really, you're Georgia,
yeah,
and your 5th-year quarterback threw 2 interceptions in the first half, and it was just bad. So, and not taking anything away from Georgia, but you can't beat a team that's had that many close games, especially in a college playoff system where there's 12, and your resume has to be strong to get in when they're allowing 12 people in.
Absolutely. And, speaking of Georgia, that's the next game because they got Ole Miss this week. They're heading down to the Grove. Ole Miss kind of putting up, looking like the Ole Miss that we saw earlier in the season against an SEC team. They got Georgia coming to town. this is a de facto elimination game for Ole Miss too. So they got to get this one if they want to stay in the conversation. But you mentioned Georgia playing a lot of close games, senior quarterback kind of pressing the ball a little bit too much. How do you see this game unfolding?
I mean, Ole Miss beat up on Arkansas last week, right? Was that one?
Yes.
They're not going to be able to do that against Georgia. They're just not. Georgia went straight man coverage against Alabama and shut them down. So you're talking a phenomenal football defense anyway. Some people don't like them, but I like Ole Miss's offense a lot. Their head coach is his character. Yeah. If I had to bet my bottom dollar, I'd probably still pick Georgia if I was betting money. But since we're not betting money, I'd probably go with Ole Miss just because I'd like to see it. I like Lane Kiffin. He is just usually I err on the side of head coaches that were linemen at some point in their career. But he's got that, that surfer quarterback thing going on, and he's got a personality to him, and I like how he does the football thing. Most is.
Yeah. So the one word you mentioned about him, he is definitely a character. He is something else. He's not afraid to stir the pot.
No, it's like as much as he says what every head coach wants to say in the back of their mind, but they don't say it because you don't want to get raked over the coals for something crazy like that. But he doesn't care.
No.
He'll tweet something just outlandish and people will be blowing him up. And I bet he just turns the notifications off. He probably has a Twitter phone, but puts that phone in the drawer and then just goes out and hangs out by the pool or whatever. So, yeah, he's different. He's a different cat, but he's a good football coach.
Yeah, he is
a line of good football coaches. So,
yeah, for sure. I'd probably go with Georgia because they do have it's the big games, and Georgia gets up for big games. Now, for the Bama game, they got up a little bit too late for that one. They tried to, but that one ought to be a good game. And then Michigan and Indiana. Indiana has been a really good football team this year, ranked in the top 10. They have just done a great job. The guy they brought in from James Madison has done a phenomenal job. And I tell you what, it's hard not to root for Indiana right now. And they got Ohio State, I believe, next week. So that's a preview for a game we're picking next week. But it's hard not to root for this team and this coach to not do well and continue this run. And they got Michigan. He said early in the preseason, hey, Michigan sucks. Ohio State sucks. So he's got his first test right here with Michigan coming to town.
He's granted, he has really good football players, but nobody would ever expect Indiana to be undefeated.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Indiana because, the fight, go Indiana football teams just because Notre Dame's there. And, I'm not going to choose Michigan ever. Yeah. So, but regardless of my distaste for Michigan also, they got something. Nobody has faith in them or him, really, honestly, their head coach either. And they're proving that they're someone that can tangle with anybody. And then, are they at Indiana?
Yeah, they're at Indiana.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you got Michigan going over there. Michigan, they struggle sometimes. I remember, what was it? I forgot what the quarterback's name was, but he had like 23 passing yards or something at a Division I football game. That's just not going to cut it. I think Indiana's playing really explosive football. They're well coached, clearly. They've got the Jimmies and the Joes, and I think they're riding this passion that it takes a lot more than a 5-star recruit to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And like a lot of those guys that the coach brought over were from James Madison, so he's known them. He knows their playing style, and you bring in a lot of transfers like he did. You don't know how it's going to all come together and how it's going to mix together. But I tell you what, they have built that thing up really great this year. And of course, the big one, Ohio State, that's going to be the big one because it's at Columbus. That ought to be a tough one. But hey, I'm loving seeing Indiana football kind of rise because normally it's basketball for them, but for football, it doesn't happen. a whole lot. So it's good to see them have some fun in football for sure.
It's like when Coach Leipold at Kansas, when they're rolling, it's like, well, Kansas shouldn't be a good football school because they're a basketball school. And they're doing all right this year, but they have those couple year stretches where they were like a quarterback away from being a 10 or 11 win team, and you're like, they can do it. They can be good at both, I should say. And then you get Indiana, who historically really, really good at basketball, and then football wise, they've been kind of But now, I mean, they're going to be able to, if they keep this up, they'll have to pick a little recruit wise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Coach, I'm going to get you out of here. It's been great talking to you this week. Good luck on Friday night. It should be a fun night, and go Tigers.
Thank you, man. Go Tigers.
All right, everybody. That's going to do it for this edition of Talking Tigers. Again, East Prairie Friday night, pregame 6:45 kickoff, 7 o'clock. You don't want to miss it, whether it's on video or on the airways. You don't want to miss it as we get you ready for Tiger playoff football. So until then, everybody, until next week, have a good weekend. Have fun at the game.